What's up, guys? It's Squishy Pixels here, back with part 2 of how to make the chatbot website. Today we're going to be focusing on the UI and front-end design of the actual product. Okay, so last video we made this roadmap, and what we need to work on right now is the front-end UI for the website. So if we go to our VS Code IDE, what we should have is our index.html completely set up and our style.css file created. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to make a background for our web page. We don't want it to just be plain white because that would look a little bit boring. So what we're going to do is type in style.css body, HTML, open brackets, and then enter. So what this is doing is body, HTML is referencing the entire web page. So anything we write in this class will apply to our entire web page. So now we want to make our background. So we can type in background color. And for the color, I'm going to use the exact same color as ChatGPT. So if I just pull up my color picker here, and we can see that this is the hex code for our color. So I'll copy that. And I can just paste that in here. And make sure to put a hashtag before it. Now if we reload our live server webpage, we can see that it now has a background. Okay, so the next thing that we need to make is an input box where the user can actually type in their message. So what you want to do is go to your index.html file. And what's really cool is HTML already has a built-in function to make an input box. So you can just type in input and then click tab, and it should autocomplete because the default type is text. And now if you go over to your live server, we can see a text box here which we can type in. This is pretty cool, but this doesn't look very good. We want to move this text box down to the bottom of the screen in the center. And also we need to make it bigger and more rounded. So what we're going to do is go to our style.css, and in our body, HTML, we're going to write width 100% and height 100%. And this is just because by default, HTML has its width at like 98% and its height is not spanning the full height of the screen. So we just need to specify this so we have no errors. So we're going to position this text box using a flex box. So what we're going to do is say display flex, and now it's a flex box. So this might look a little bit weird right now, but that's completely okay because it's going to shape up in the end. So we want to move this to the center of the screen horizontally. And to do this, we can just type in justify content center. And now we need to move it to the bottom of the screen vertically. And to do that, we can say align items and And as you can see, the input box is now at the very bottom of the screen. Okay, so our text box is now positioned correctly, but the text box itself looks a bit stale and mundane. So to fix this, we can go to our index.html and we can find where we made our text box and make a class for it. So I'll say class equals input box. And you can call this whatever you want. I'm just saying input box because it makes sense. So now if we go to our style.css, we can say dot input box. And whatever we write inside of this class will only affect our text box and not the rest of the page. So just looking at the text box right now, it's definitely too small, both horizontally and vertically. So I can say width 45% and height 8%. And automatically you can see that this just looks a lot better already. So the edges for this box are 90 degrees, and I feel like it makes it look a bit too cubic. So what we can do is we can say border radius 10 pixels, and it's just going to make the edges a bit more rounded. That looks good, but the white background of this text box blends out a little bit too much because of the dark background of our website. So what we can say is background color, and I'm going to paste in a hex which I found online. you guys can use it as well. It's 2F, 2F, 2F. And this looks better, but the text box now blends in a little bit too much with the website. So to distinguish it, we can make a border. We can say border 1 pixel solid white. And essentially what this does is make a border that's 1 pixel wide, completely solid, and the color is white. And as you can see, the text box is far more visible now. There is still one problem, which is when we're typing in the text box, since my text is black, it blends in with the background of the text box, and it becomes hard to see. So what we can do is say color white. And what this is going to do is make the text color white. And as you can see, this already looks a lot better. So one final style edit that I want to do is the text box right now is touching the very bottom of the screen, and I want to move it like a little bit higher. So what I can do is use margin, and I'll say 3%. And what this does is just make it so on all sides it's 3% to 3. It has a 3% gap. So this looks pretty good now. Okay, so now we have a text box which we can successfully type in, but we don't have a button which we can click to submit our message. So before I continue on with this tutorial, I want to quickly use Bootstrap. So let me just do a quick rundown of what Bootstrap is. Bootstrap is a free and open source website where there's a ton of components like, cool buttons, animated icons, etc. And if you just use these two lines in your code, it's kind of like an importable library, then you can use all of these components and you barely have to write any code. So I'm going to quickly import both of these. I'll make sure to link this in the description. But once you guys are on this page, you want to go to this link ref equals in this line here and copy the entire line. And you want to paste this at the top of your head. Now what you want to do is go to the line at the bottom that says script source equals, and you want to copy that line as well. And you want to paste this at the bottom of your body. And no matter what you do, this line should always be the very bottom of your body. So now that we have Bootstrap imported, we can actually add that button that I was talking about earlier. So if we just go to this Bootstrap search bar and say button, they already have so many cool buttons built in. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to be using this one right here, the one that says success. And if I just paste this in to my body, when you refresh your live server, you can see that we now have a green button and we only had to use one line of code. Okay, so right now, both of these elements are two separate elements, but what I want to do is encapsulate both of them in a div. So what I'm going to do here is say div.input and then click tab, and this will essentially create a div under the class inputs. So what I'm going to do now is take both of the elements that we've created and place it inside of this div. And there's going to be a few styling edits when we check back. Yeah, you can now see that this text box is a lot smaller, and I'm going to explain why. So if we just go into our dev tools here, then we can actually see that this inputs div is very small. So when we say in style.css 45%, we're now only taking 45% of this div, which is not that much. While previously we were taking 45% of the entire screen. So there's a pretty easy fix for this, which is just taking all of the code that we made in body, HTML and placing it in a new class called inputs. And just because we want our body, HTML to still be spanning the full page, we need to once again specify width 100% and height 100%. And we can now see that everything is back to normal. However, it's now encapsulated in one div. And what we can do now is remove this margin and in the inputs class say gap 2%. And that's going to be creating a little bit of space between the text box and the button. But we can notice now that, like before, the text box is now touching the bottom of the screen. So to bring it back up, what we can do is go to this inputs class, which again now contains both the text box and the button. And we can move that entire div up by saying transform translate y -3%. And that's just going to move the entire div up 3% on the y-axis. So as you can see, there's space now. And this button still looks kind of funky because it's a lot smaller than the div. So what we can say is go to the button in index.html, and over here say style equals width 8%. And that's the same as, height 8%. And that's the same as this text box. So now it looks in line with the text box. Okay, and since we used Bootstrap to make this button, by default, the text that's inside of the button says success. I'm going to change this to submit because this is a submit button. And I just want to specify that what we did over here by saying style equals the height 8%, that's what we call inline CSS, and it's basically the same thing that we did in the regular CSS file. But since it's only one line long, rather than making a class for this button and then referencing it in the CSS file, we can just do it in one line right here. But if you're going to make more edits to your button, then instead of cramming everything into one line, it is recommended to move it to another file. But since we're not writing much, I just did it inside of this line. Okay, and some final edits I'm going to do to this section is where it says input type equals text, class equals input box. Over here, I'm going to add another line that says placeholder equals ask anything ... And essentially what this is going to do is if we go over to our live server here, we can see that there's text here that says ask anything. And when you start typing, it goes away. That's a pretty cool edit, but this placeholder text is touching the very side of the box, which looks a bit weird. So what we're going to do is again use inline CSS and say style equals padding 1%. And padding is basically just margin, but internally. So margin makes space outside of the element. Padding does the same thing, but inside of the element. So as you can see, there's now space inside of the element, and it's not touching the side of the box anymore. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to be making a nav bar. And a nav bar is basically just a bar at the top of the screen, which has, quick links and text that allows you to navigate in between the website. So we could code this manually, but Bootstrap actually has a navbar built into it. So if we just search up navbar here, it'll take us to this page, and scrolling down a little bit, we can find this one over here. And if we just copy this text and place it at the top, since the navbar is the very top thing in the website, I just need to format everything because it gets a little bit weird sometimes. And now if we reload our live server, we can see a navbar over here. So we're actually not going to need the search bar. So we can just remove that by going to this input here and deleting it. And now that that is gone, this button here that says search, we want to change this to new chat. And this is just going to be the button that we use if we want to create a new chat. So right now, this navbar looks a bit weird just because it's like white and the background for our website is dark. So we want to make this navbar a dark theme. And if we just go to Bootstrap over here and Control F and search up dark, we can see over here that if we use data bs theme equals dark, then you can change a navbar to dark mode. So what we're going to do here is go to our navbar, and outside of this class, we're going to say data bs theme equals dark. And now reloading our live server, we can see that now this navbar is dark and fits in a lot better. And our button is even animated, so that's really cool. One final thing, which is this navbar just says navbar on it. Instead, I'm going to change this to say AI chatbot, so people actually know like what this application is. Okay, so the final thing that I want to do is add some text like in the center of the screen that says like enhance your productivity with AI. So what I'm going to do is actually make a div for it. So I'll say div.motivation. So that'll make a div with the class motivation, and inside of that I'll make an h1 tag. And h1 is basically the biggest header that HTML supports. So you can also write h2, h3, etc., but they get increasingly smaller. But I'm going to keep it as h1, and I'm going to say enhance your productivity with AI. So now this text is all the way up here. I want to move it to the center of the screen. So what I'm going to do is call the motivation class in CSS, and I'm going to say width 100%, height 100%, and this is just so I can make a flex box. And then I'll say display flex. So now it's a flex box. So to align it horizontally and vertically in the center, as discussed before, we can just say justify content center and align items center. And now the text is in the center of the screen. So, but it's not visible since the color is black. So we can just say color white. And now the text is visible. But there is one problem. Because this div is 100%, it's kind of overlapping with the inputs div and it's pushing it way far down. So what we're going to do is instead of making the align items end in the input div, instead if we bring it to the top of the input div, so align items flex start, now it's way closer to the top since it's at the top of this div, but it's still not that visible. So we're gonna say instead of minus 3% in the transform translate y, we'll do minus 15%. And this will push it up just enough so we can see it, but I want some gap from the bottom of the screen, so I'll say minus 18%. And yeah, this is our final product. So if you've been following to this point, you should have something like this. I will be also pasting the code in the description, so you guys can, check in case there's something differing between mine and your code. But aside from that, that's basically all I have from this tutorial. Stay tuned for the next one as we're going to be implementing some backend. But aside from that, yeah, I hope everybody had a good day. Thank you for watching, and peace.